Understand English but can't speak?
Speak simple.
Speak confident.
English Boost.
Boost your English.
Welcome back to English Boost, the podcast that makes learning English feel like a conversation with friends. I'm Sarah, your go-to for the facts and the frameworks.
And I'm Alex, here to keep things lively and relatable. Today we have a story that starts with a surprising statistic. Over 70% of people say they never finish a personal finance book, yet Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad has sold more than 40 million copies worldwide.
That begs the question, what makes this book so magnetic? And more importantly, how can beginners use its lessons to boost their English and their money mindset?
Exactly. In the next 20 minutes, we'll break the book down into bite-sized chunks, sprinkle in real-world examples, and give you English phrases you can start using today.
So stay tuned, because by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear roadmap, a handful of new vocab, and a fresh perspective on wealth. Ready to dive in?
Let's start with the core premise. Two fathers, two mindsets. One teaches the value of a traditional job. The other teaches the power of assets. What most people don't realize is that Kiyosaki uses these characters to illustrate a deeper language lesson. The difference between passive and active vocabulary.
Right, Alex. The Poor Dad talks about earning a salary, paying bills, and saving for retirement. In English, that's the realm of concrete nouns: salary, mortgage, expenses. Meanwhile, the Rich Dad discusses cash flow, investments, and financial freedom, which brings in abstract nouns and idioms like cash flow, passive income, and think outside the box.
And here's where it gets fascinating. The book's first lesson, The Rich Don't Work for Money, teaches us to shift from a wage-centric mindset to an asset-centric one. A great English tip here is to replace "I work for money" with "I let my money work for me." That tiny switch adds a whole new grammatical structure, using the verb let plus infinitive.
Exactly. And that leads to our first subtopic: assets versus liabilities. Kiyosaki defines an asset as something that puts money in your pocket, a liability as something that takes money out. In everyday English, you can describe a rental property as an asset, whereas a new car often becomes a liability.
But here's what's really interesting. Many beginners think a house is always an asset. In fact, if you buy a home with a huge mortgage and high maintenance costs, it can become a liability. So the phrase "my home is my biggest expense" illustrates the nuance perfectly.
That distinction also helps learners practice comparative structures. My mortgage costs more than my rent would have, or the rental income exceeds the expenses. These sentences embed the financial concept while reinforcing English grammar.
Moving on to lesson 2, why teach financial literacy? Kiyosaki argues that schools teach how to work for money, not how to make money work for you. This is a perfect moment to introduce the idiom "knowledge is power" in the phrase financial literacy.
And it ties back to language acquisition. When you learn new vocabulary in context, you remember it better. For instance, saying, "I'm improving my financial literacy by reading this book" combines both the content and the language goal.
Here's where it gets fascinating. Kiyosaki uses the concept of mindset to explain why some people stay stuck. A common phrase is mind over matter, but here we can say mindset over money. It's a subtle shift that makes the idea stick in a learner's mind.
And that brings us to our third subtopic, the cash flow quadrant. The book outlines 4 categories: employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. Each quadrant uses distinct verbs: work, manage, own, and invest. Practicing these verbs helps learners expand their action vocabulary.
What most people don't realize is that the quadrant also mirrors English proficiency levels. An employee might use basic sentences, while an investor needs complex structures, conditional sentences like, "If I invest wisely, I could generate passive income."
Exactly, Alex. And here's a real-world case study. Jane, a 28-year-old teacher, applied the quadrant model, started a small e-commerce store, business owner, and within 2 years turned it into a source of passive income. Her story illustrates the phrase, turning a side hustle into a main hustle.
And the language lesson, notice how we use turn as a verb, side hustle as a noun phrase, and main hustle as a contrasting term. Learners can mimic that pattern. I turned my hobby into a side hustle, And now it's my main hustle.
Now, let's talk about the fourth lesson: the history of taxes and the power of corporations. Kiyosaki tells a story about how the rich use corporations to protect assets and reduce taxes. This opens the door to business English terms like tax shelter, corporate structure, and legal entity.
But here's what's truly remarkable. The phrase play the game appears here. In everyday conversation, you might hear, if you want to win, you have to learn how to play the game. It's a metaphor that translates perfectly into both finance and language learning.
And that metaphor can be practiced with conditional sentences. If you understand how taxes work, you can protect your wealth. This reinforces the use of first conditional structures while embedding financial insight.
Let's pause for a quick reflection. Listeners, think about your current mindset. Are you more like the poor dad who focuses on a paycheck, or the rich dad who looks for cash flow opportunities? Write down one habit you can change this week.
Great reflection, Alex. While you jot that down, I want to share a statistic. According to a 2023 survey, 45% of millennials who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad reported a shift in how they talk about money, using terms like investment and passive income more frequently.
And that's just the beginning. The next lesson in the book is about the power of financial education. Kiyosaki argues that financial education is the missing piece in most school curricula. This gives us another phrase to practice. Financial education is the missing link.
Exactly. And it leads to a powerful English construction. If we integrate financial education into schools, students will be better prepared for real-world challenges. This is a perfect example of a second conditional sentence.
Now let's dive into the concept of fear and greed that Kiyosaki mentions as emotional drivers. A vivid idiom here is fear of missing out, or FOMO. Beginners often hear this in pop culture, but here it has a financial twist.
And we can pair it with the phrase, greed is a double-edged sword. By discussing these idioms, learners get a taste of nuanced English while exploring the psychology behind investment decisions.
Here's a real-world scenario. Imagine you have $5,000 to invest. You could put it in a high-interest savings account, low risk, or a startup venture, high risk. The book would ask you to evaluate the risk-reward ratio, a phrase you can practice. I weighed the risk-reward ratio before deciding.
Exactly, Alex. And notice the verb phrase, weighed the risk-reward ratio. It's a collocation that advanced learners love to master. Using such collocations makes your English sound more natural.
But here's where it gets fascinating. Kiyosaki ends the book with a call to action. Start small, think big, and keep learning. This is a perfect closing line for our episode, and we can break it down. Start small is an imperative, think big uses a metaphor, and keep learning reinforces lifelong education.
And that's a great segue into our final subtopic, applying the lessons today. For beginners, I recommend 3 actionable steps. 1. Identify one expense that could become an asset. 2. Learn 3 new financial terms this week. And 3. Practice using them in sentences.
What do you think, Sarah? Should we add a quick challenge for our listeners?
Absolutely, Alex. Listeners, try this. Take a common phrase like, I earn a salary, and rewrite it using the rich dad perspective. My salary works for me. Record yourself saying it 3 times a day for a week.
And remember, the goal isn't just to memorize vocabulary, but to shift your mindset. As Kiyosaki says, your future is created by what you do today, not tomorrow.
Before we wrap up, here's a quick recap. We explored assets versus liabilities, the cash flow quadrant, tax strategies, and the power of financial education, all while picking up useful English phrases and structures.
And we've sprinkled in idioms, collocations, and conditional sentences to make sure you walk away with both financial insight and language tools.
That's a wrap on our deep dive, but stay tuned because next week we'll break down another bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and show you how to use its principles to boost your English fluency.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who wants to level up their money mindset and English at the same time.
Remember, learning is a journey, not a destination. Keep practicing the phrases we discussed, and watch your confidence grow.
And if you have questions or want us to cover a specific chapter, drop us a line on our socials. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay financially savvy, and keep boosting your English.
See you in the next episode.
Goodbye.